Before I tell you my story, let me ask you something. What would you do if the person you gave everything for, the child you raised alone, turned around and humiliated you in front of the world? What if years of sacrifice, years of silent struggle, were reduced to one cruel laugh? That happened to me. My name is Clara Mitchell. I am 54 years old, a single mother, and a seamstress in Atlanta, Georgia. I never lived a big life. I never needed one. I lived quietly in a modest home, just outside the city, my days filled with fabric scraps, humming sewing machines, and memories of the daughter I loved more than anything. Sophie. When Sophie was born, her father walked out within the first year. I raised her alone, with nothing but my hands, my determination, and a heart that refused to give up. Atlanta can be loud and fast, but my world was simple: a rented two-bedroom house, a small sewing business, and the little girl who called me Mommy. Sophie grew up playing on the front porch while I worked on hems and wedding gowns for neighbors. I used to watch her draw pictures with crayons on scraps of leftover fabric, giggling as the MARTA trains rumbled in the distance. Back then, she was my shadow. Back then, I thought our bond was unbreakable. But time changes children. The crayons were replaced by iPhones, the porch afternoons by Instagram posts. Sophie drifted into a world of parties, selfies, and friends who looked down on me. I told myself it was normal, that every child pulls away. Still, each time she brushed past me without a word, a piece of me ached. Yet I kept loving her, kept sacrificing. For 15 years, I did something she never knew. I built a college fund for her, out of sewing wages, coupon savings, skipped dinners, even skipped doctor's visits. I saved. I knew she once dreamed of studying art in California, and I wanted her to have that chance, even if she never said thank you. By the time her 21st birthday came close, the fund was solid, ready, but money wasn't all I wanted to give her. I wanted to give her a reminder of where she came from, of who she was before the world swallowed her. So I worked night after night on a quilt, hand-stitched with care. Every panel carried a memory: the peach-colored dress she wore on her first day of school, the blue bicycle she begged for one summer, the yellow daffodils that grew by our porch each spring. It wasn't just a quilt, it was our story in fabric. As I folded it gently into wrapping paper, I imagined her face lighting up, her arms around me, maybe even tears in her eyes. I imagined wrong. Sophie's 21st birthday wasn't like the birthdays I used to throw for her back in our small Atlanta backyard. Back then, I strung up paper lanterns, baked a cake from scratch, and let neighborhood kids run wild until the streetlights came on. No, this time was different. This was glossy. This was loud. Sophie's friends had rented out a rooftop lounge in downtown Atlanta, with neon lights pulsing against the skyline, champagne bottles with sparklers, and a DJ spinning beats so heavy I could feel them in my chest before I even walked through the doors. I came in quietly, clutching my package like it might shatter if I let go. Brown craft paper, tied with a satin ribbon I'd saved from an old wedding gown job. I knew it wasn't wrapped like the others, which glittered in metallic paper, and designer ribbons stacked high on the gift table. Mine looked small, out of place. I told myself it didn't matter. It was what was inside that counted. Sophie looked radiant under the lights, in a fitted red dress and heels I knew I could never afford. She moved from group to group, laughing loudly, phone flashing as selfies piled up. Her boyfriend, Ethan, stood close, sharp suit, smug expression, one arm draped around her like she was a trophy. When Sophie finally spotted me, her smile faltered for just a second. "Mom, you made it," she said, her voice polite, almost distant, like I was a guest, not the woman who once worked through the night to buy her first pair of ballet shoes. I nodded, holding out the gift. "Happy birthday, sweetheart." She glanced at it, then pointed toward the gift table. "Just put it with the others," and she turned back to her friends before I could say another word. I stood there, heart sinking, but I didn't put it down. Something inside me insisted I needed to hand it to her myself. Needed her to see it come from my hands. Later, when the music paused and she began opening gifts, the crowd gathered. Laughter and cheers erupted as Sophie tore into boxes. A Gucci purse from Ethan, diamond earrings from a friend, stacks of cash cards. Phones recorded every second. Then came mine. She paused at the plain wrapping. "Oh, this one's from my mom," she announced, almost with a smirk. The crowd quieted slightly as she tore the paper. Out came the quilt, unfolding slowly, colors spilling across her lap. For a moment there was silence. Then Sophie lifted it high and laughed. "A blanket? Are you serious? Did you pull this out of the attic or something?" The crowd chuckled. Someone muttered, "That's different." Ethan shook his head, grinning, and added, "Vintage vibes, huh?" Sophie scrunched her nose. "It's sweet, I guess, but a little cheap." She propped it against the table leg like a decoration and moved on to the next shiny box. My cheeks burned. My hands trembled. No one saw me standing there, holding back tears. No one cared. I left before the cake was cut. The drive home felt endless, though the streets of Atlanta were nearly empty at that hour. I kept replaying Sophie's laugh in my head, the way she held the quilt up like a joke, the way her friends smirked, the way Ethan shook his head as if I were some pitiful, embarrassing relic. My hands gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. The city lights blurred through my tears. When I pulled into the driveway of my little house, the silence hit me like a wall. No music, no laughter, just the hum of the refrigerator and the ticking clock in the kitchen. I set my purse down and sat at the table where Sophie had once done her homework, crayons scattered across the wood. I could still picture her swinging her legs under the chair, asking me how to spell words, smiling when I praised her. I closed my eyes, and then that image shattered under the memory of her voice earlier that night. "It's cheap." I stood and walked to the old filing cabinet in the hallway. My fingers found the folder instantly, thick and heavy. On the tab was my handwriting, faded, but clear. "College fund, Sophie." I carried it back to the kitchen, set it on the table, and opened it. Out spilled 15 years of sacrifices, deposit slips, receipts, account statements. Each one told a story. The month I skipped new shoes so I could add $50. The winter I kept the heat low and wore 2 sweaters so I could save an extra $100. The birthday money from my sister I had promised to spend on myself, but quietly tucked away instead. I walked to the corner desk where my old desktop computer sat. The machine groaned to life as I pressed the button. I typed slowly, my fingers stiff, the same password I'd used since the day I opened the account. When the numbers appeared on the screen, I froze. All those years of hunger, of sleepless nights, of aching hands, it was sitting right there, waiting for her. My heart pounded. I hovered over the transfer button. To Sophie's account or to mine? My breath came shallow. The word from the party echoed. Cheap. My hands steadied. I changed the destination to my personal checking account, entered the amount, and clicked. The progress bar crawled across the screen, giving me every chance to change my mind. I didn't. Transfer complete. Balance updated. I stared at it for a long time, then leaned back in my chair. My body felt lighter and heavier at the same time. I wasn't angry. I wasn't vindictive. I was simply done. For the first time in my life, I had chosen myself. I whispered into the silence, "This time, it's for me." And for the first time in years, the silence didn't feel like punishment. It felt like freedom. 2 days later, I was still adjusting to the strange quiet inside me. The money sat in my account now, untouched, like a secret I wasn't ready to say out loud. Each time I checked the balance, I felt a shiver, not guilt, but something closer to disbelief. I had actually done it. That afternoon, there was a knock at the door. When I opened it, Sophie stood on the porch, her hair neatly pulled back, holding a white bakery box. The logo on top was from an expensive patisserie downtown, the kind I used to pass by on Peachtree Street and admire from the outside, but never step inside. "Mommy," she said brightly, her voice almost too sweet. The word hit me in the chest. She hadn't called me mommy in years. She stepped forward, kissed my cheek, and walked inside, like she had when she was a little girl. I brought you some macarons. I know you love lemon. She set the box on the counter and smiled as if nothing had ever happened. I stayed by the doorway, watching her. She looked perfect. Polished nails, flawless makeup, a soft cashmere sweater. Everything about her seemed practiced. Still, when she sat at the kitchen table and folded her hands like a child waiting for permission to speak, my heart pulled in two directions. I wanted to apologize, Sophie said softly, for the party, for what I said about the quilt. I was just overwhelmed, you know? Too many people, too much attention. I didn't mean it. She glanced toward the folded quilt, draped over a chair. It's beautiful, Mom, really. I shouldn't have laughed. Her words landed carefully, one by one, like stones placed on a fragile bridge. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to run across that bridge. I miss you, she added, her eyes glistening just enough to look like tears. I know I've been distant. Life's been busy, but I don't want us to drift apart. I want us again. I sat across from her, my hands folded tightly in my lap. The apology was what I had craved, but something in me stayed still. Then she leaned closer, lowering her voice. I've been thinking a lot about college again, about California. I know things are complicated with the fund, but I just want to be close to you no matter what. My chest tightened. She had woven the words perfectly. Love, regret, and a thread of hope, tied neatly to the dream I had carried for her all those years. I forced a smile. We'll see, Sophie. I'll think about it. She beamed, the same radiant smile she once had as a child, showing me her drawings. But behind my smile, a whisper lingered. Why now? The house felt lighter after Sophie left that day, but it was the kind of lightness that doesn't last. I replayed her words again and again, wondering if they were real. Maybe she meant it. Maybe she didn't. My heart wanted to believe, but my bones told me to be careful. The answer came sooner than I expected. 3 days later, Sophie stopped by again. She brought her laptop this time, saying she needed help printing out a scholarship application. You've always been better with computers, she joked, setting it on my desk before heading to the kitchen to grab a snack. I showed her how to connect to my printer, and after a few minutes, she gathered her things and rushed out, late for dinner with friends. It wasn't until hours later, when I went to tidy up the desk, that I noticed her laptop still sitting there, screen open, humming softly. I almost closed it, but something caught my eye, a chat window glowing on the screen. The name at the top read Chloe, one of her closest friends. My first instinct was to look away. Privacy, boundaries. But then I saw the words. They weren't gentle. They weren't remorseful. They were sharp enough to cut. Don't worry, Sophie had typed. She's falling for it. I brought the macarons, did the whole mommy act, even pretended to cry. Classic emotional bait. She always melts when I bring up family stuff. My hand froze on the mouse. My stomach lurched. Another message blinked below. I'll get the fund back by summer. Just a couple more visits, some hugs, some nostalgia. She's predictable. I'll be in California by fall. My heart hammered so loudly, I thought the neighbors could hear it. The screen blurred as my eyes filled with tears, but the words burned into me, line after line. It hadn't been real. None of it. The macarons, the hugs, the soft voice, the talk about missing me. It was all staged, a performance designed to pull the money out of my hands. I sank into the chair, staring at the glowing screen. For a long moment I couldn't breathe. I thought of the quilt, mocked as cheap. I thought of the 15 years of sacrifices, every skipped meal, every long night bent over a sewing machine, all dismissed as nothing more than a resource to be mined. My lips trembled as I whispered into the quiet room. I raised a stranger. The betrayal wasn't loud. It didn't scream. It sat heavy in my chest, cold and deliberate. And I realized, with a clarity that hurt, that the daughter I loved more than life itself had turned my love into a weapon against me. And I wasn't going to melt anymore. That night, I couldn't bring myself to sleep. I sat in the living room, the glow of the streetlight seeping through the curtains. Sophie's words from the chat replayed in my head like a cruel song. She's predictable. Each syllable hammered the truth deeper. Her love wasn't real, just a performance to win back the fund. My eyes fell on the quilt, still draped across the chair, the same quilt she had mocked as cheap. I walked over, touched the fabric, and for the first time, I didn't see her ridicule. I saw the story inside it, the hours, the cuts on my fingers, the silent nights I spent stitching memories together. It wasn't worthless. It was everything. With a trembling hand, I fetched my old camera from the closet. I laid the quilt across the table, let the morning light spill over it, and snapped a photo. Then I sat at my computer and opened a forum I had joined years ago but never posted on. A small online community for women artisans and quilters. My fingers hesitated, but then I typed, "This quilt was called cheap by someone I love. But every stitch carries my life, my sacrifices, my memories. Maybe it isn't enough for some, but it is everything I have. I wanted to share it with people who might understand." I hit post and sat back, expecting nothing. Maybe a handful of polite comments. Maybe silence. But by morning, my inbox was flooded. Notifications lit up the screen. Hundreds of likes, shares, comments. Strangers from around the country wrote things like, "This made me cry. It's beautiful." Another said, "Whoever called this cheap doesn't know what love looks like." Someone else asked if I sold prints, if I made commissions. I blinked at the screen, overwhelmed. My quilt, the one Sophie had laughed at, was suddenly touching lives far beyond Atlanta. Then came a private message that stopped me cold. It was from a woman named Dana, a curator from a gallery in New York. "Hi Clara, your quilt stopped me in my tracks. It isn't just fabric, it's a story, and stories matter. We would be honored to feature it in an upcoming exhibit." I read the message 3 times, tears streaming down my face. New York, a gallery, my quilt hanging on a wall for people to see, not tossed against a table like a joke. I typed back with shaking hands, yes, I would be honored. That evening, when I boxed the quilt carefully to ship it out, my chest didn't feel heavy anymore. For the first time, it felt like the weight was lifting. The gift that had been rejected in Atlanta was about to rise in New York. The gallery in New York was nothing like the dim little rooms I had lived in for so long. Its walls gleamed white, the lights perfectly angled, the air filled with the soft murmur of voices studying each piece. And there, against the center wall, hung my quilt, the same quilt Sophie had laughed at. The placard beneath it read, "The Rejected Gift, Clara Mitchell." I stood off to the side, nervous, my hands clasped tight. People paused in front of my work, tilting their heads, leaning in, whispering. Some even wiped tears from their cheeks. I overheard one woman say, "It feels like love sewn into cloth." My throat tightened. They saw it. They really saw it. By the end of the evening, Dana, the curator, pulled me aside. "Clara, we have an offer," she said gently. She handed me a pen. A private collector wanted to buy the quilt, $25,000. My knees nearly buckled. I had spent 15 years scraping pennies into a folder. And now, one piece of fabric I had poured my heart into was worth more than all of it. I swallowed hard and whispered, "Yes." That night in the hotel, I didn't sleep. I stared at the city lights outside my window and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Power. Not the loud kind, not revenge, but a quiet strength that filled the hollow places Sophie had left behind. Word spread quickly. Articles appeared online about the Atlanta seamstress whose quilt told a story of sacrifice. Invitations followed, conferences, podcasts, art collectives. For once, the world wanted my voice, not just my work, but news also traveled back home. A week after I returned, Sophie showed up at my door. Her eyes were red, her voice trembling. "Mom, I saw the gallery. I saw what happened. I wanted to say I'm sorry." She sniffled, reaching for my hand. "I was stupid. I was selfish, but I want to fix this. I still want to go to Cal Arts, and maybe now, maybe you could." Her words trailed off, but I knew the ending. Always the same. Money. I pulled my hand back and stood tall. Sophie, you didn't just insult a quilt, you insulted me. You pretended to love me to get what you wanted. That isn't love. That's manipulation. Her face fell. So you won't help me? I shook my head slowly. I already did help you. For 15 years, I gave everything I had. You threw it away. From now on, if you want a dream, you'll work for it yourself. I walked to my desk, pulled out the thick folder, and pressed a new label across the front. Freedom Fund, Clara Mitchell. For the first time, I said the words out loud, steady and strong. This is mine now. Sophie stared at me, silent, wounded pride flickering in her eyes. Then she turned and left. I didn't chase her. I didn't cry. I simply poured myself a cup of coffee. My hands didn't shake anymore. Months passed, and my life looked nothing like it had before. The woman who once sat hunched over an old sewing machine in a quiet Atlanta kitchen was gone. In her place stood someone freer, someone stronger. My quilt, the one mocked as cheap, had opened doors I never dreamed of. An invitation arrived one morning in a cream-colored envelope. A gallery in Paris was hosting an international exhibit on women artisans. They wanted me, Clara Mitchell, to showcase the rejected gift. The very idea made my heart race. Paris, a place I'd only ever seen in photographs, now asking for my story. When I arrived, the city glowed brighter than any dream. The gallery was filled with light, the walls alive with colors and textures from women around the world. And there, draped under perfect lighting, was my quilt, framed like a masterpiece. People gathered, listening as I told the story, how love had been dismissed, how sacrifice had been mocked, and how something discarded became a voice. When I finished, the room was silent, not out of emptiness but out of respect. Then came the applause, loud, long, and genuine. That night, as I stood on the banks of the Seine with the Eiffel Tower glittering in the distance, I felt a peace I had never known. For years, I thought my worth depended on being Sophie's provider, on sacrificing until I had nothing left. But here, thousands of miles away, I understood that my worth had always been mine to claim. Back in Atlanta weeks later, I found a letter waiting in the mailbox. The handwriting was Sophie's. My chest tightened as I opened it. Mom, I can't undo what I did. I know I was selfish. I've started working 2 jobs, saving for school myself. I don't deserve your forgiveness yet, but I hope one day you'll see me differently. I'm sorry. Sophie. I read the words twice. For the first time, there was no anger, no urge to run to her or push her away, just acceptance. I folded the letter and slipped it into the drawer where the old folder used to sit. The Freedom Fund was gone now, invested in me, my studio, my travels, my new life. That evening, I finished a new quilt. A woman stood at the edge of a mountain, her arms wide open, her face turned to the sky. I called it freedom. I hung it proudly in my hallway. The lesson was clear. True love is never cheap. Its worth is measured not in money, but in respect. And when you finally respect yourself, the world will too. I was no longer invisible. I was Clara Mitchell, and I was free.